Welcome to the show, folks. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. Today we have my friend Jason Matzinger calling in from Bozeman, Montana. Welcome, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Second time we've tried to do this, but
so a little fun fact, guys. We had a good rehearsal of the show. A few months ago, we recorded this an episode, and I would love to blame this on Jason, but I just can't. It doesn't work. I lost the episode. I don't know how, but I did. So it was a fun 2-hour conversation that we had. That's somewhere in the universe, but you know, no regrets. So here we are again. I mean, the reality is, Jason, we're going to do this multiple times anyway. So, you know,
sure,
it's good practice. For those that don't know, Jason Matzinger is has been a great friend of mine for, I don't know, definitely over 10 years, maybe over 12 years, maybe closer to 15 years. But he is a TV host, a hunting content creator, licensed electrician, father, amazing dude. One of those people that's just, I could always call with a problem or something exciting to share, and he just listens, and he's a really good friend. And in the industry that we both play in, those don't always come around super easy. So it's nice to have known you for the last decade, dude.
Yeah, I know. Time flies. I was just trying to think about it. I was thinking around that 12 years too, but
it's something like that. Because you were one of the first people that indirectly Sitka sponsored, I guess, because you were working with a local retailer in Bozeman called Schnee's Boots, and you used to sell your DVDs and partner with them back in the day, right? Yeah. Around 2008, 2007 ish.
Yeah.
And Schnee's was Sitka Gear's first dealer.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think, you know, indirectly and directly, you started wearing Sitka really, really early, around the first year it came out, which would have been 2006 when Schnee's started carrying it. Yeah. And I started at Sitka in 2007. So I think we just kind of probably met around that time. I don't know when we actually it might have been at like Elk Camp in 2008.
It was either Elk Camp or SCI. I can't remember which one. They all kind of run together, but I do remember meeting you and Jonathan there for the first time through Les Hausauer and John there at Schnee's.
Isn't it crazy? Like, that seems like long ago history, right? But also it seems like it was like yesterday. I know that's cliche, but life is so weird, man. Like, it's just so weird. When you're in that moment, you're like, these are the new times. You know, my dad talks about the old times. These are the new times. But then, like, all of a sudden, like, we're starting to get old, and those are old times. You know, 2007, 2008 to my kids is like ancient history because they weren't even alive then.
Sure.
And my oldest kid is 11. It's just crazy how far we've come, but also how far the industry has come from then. You know, if you think about back then, that's when Elk Camp, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, used to have what they call Elk Camp, which was in Reno. It was in Reno, and then one year they went to Dallas. They've had it a few places, but originally it was in Reno. And, you know, technical hunting clothing wasn't a thing in the hunting space. And, you know, Sitka partnered with probably Schnee's in their booth at the show, I think, and started showing these technical hunting clothing to all these elk hunters. And they're like, whoa, this is nice. Clothing that actually fits and it's comfortable. But I definitely don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But the point is like how one thing affects the other and affects the other and affects the other. And all it's just a domino effect of how the industry has changed so much over the last 10 years, some for good and maybe some for bad. But regardless, we've seen those phases, and we're still seeing phases, right?
Oh yeah, it's constantly evolving and changing with different platforms, different ways of getting your message out there. I mean, podcasts, you know, those weren't a thing when I started doing this, really. And if it was, they certainly weren't on the radar as much as they are now. And even YouTube and apps like My Outdoor TV or Carbon TV, Waypoint, there's so many ways to get your message out there, where 12, 13 years ago when I first started, it was like print or TV, there
Or
really
DVDs.
well, yeah, there was really no in between. And so, there's been a ton of change, like you say, a snowball, and it does make you realize, how fast time flies, but also how what you're doing can create an impact long term, when you don't realize it at the time, whether it's working on a product or working on, a film concept or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crazy to see, the impact that those things have and how they all do work together to the change and the difference in the industry today. When you look at from the gear to where it was when we started to where it is now, to even how people tell their stories, like in my world, through film. There really wasn't hunting films. It was just this cookie cutter kind of TV platform. And guys like Mark Seacat and Sitka and kind of some of those early pioneers of that really sparked it. And it's just been a flood of creativity since. It's pretty cool to see everybody and everything that's surfaced since that time.
Yeah, I just think when you were, because you're still a licensed electrician, but before you started doing this, you've always been a hunter, but you and always have kind of captured what you've been doing. But just think back to before you really dove in head first, how much, like, can you even imagine? Could you even have imagined how far you've come or how far the industry's come if you were to zap back to that Jason Matzinger, like in 2005, 2004?
For sure. I've learned a lot. I've been humbled. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of things right too, but it is pretty crazy to look back and think of, how the decisions I've made have sculpted into what I do and how I do it now.
What made you leave a lucrative and reliable profession like being involved in your family's business? Your dad, I believe, owns a prominent electrical business in Montana, and you got your license. I mean, that's a great job, and that's a lot of hard work to get there. What made you think for a second that you could scratch out a living filming adventures?
Well, I honestly didn't know if I could or not, but I think timing of everything was huge, because right about the time I got my electrical license and really started to look at life more than just day to day, like I did when I was younger, look at the decisions I was making and how I wanted to set myself up for the future, was right around the time that my mom passed away of cancer. And my dad has been a workaholic my entire life. Like, if you're not working physically, hard labor, daylight to dark, you're sort of wasting good, valuable daylight, basically. And so I watched this guy who was just a hard ass growing up. And when mom died, he just flipped a switch. And I remember him saying, like, it doesn't matter if you have the time. It doesn't matter if you have the money. Just go do it, because you'll regret it if you don't. And so it was timing of me wanting to chase this dream and everything going on with my mom and stuff. It was kind of that moment in life where I was like, well, why not? I'm young. Take a shot. See if I can make something out of this. And if it doesn't work, I always have my electrical license to follow up on. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy electrical. I did. Where we live here, you've got these beautiful mountain homes that are made of log and rustic timbers, and people don't want to see the wiring, and like lights in unique places. And I love the creativity that went into being an electrician, but I knew I had one shot to try this. And I knew that if my mom was still alive and the way that my dad felt at the time, if I didn't do it, I would regret it, you know? So
what type of cancer did your mom have?
she ultimately died of liver failure. It started in her intestine, and then they ended up removing like 12 inches of her large intestine, and they thought they got it. And then a while later, it ended up showing up in her liver, and she ended up getting a transplant there, and then just ended up spending over a year in the hospital fighting infections that she could never overcome in St. Louis, Missouri. So,
why St. Louis, Missouri?
Because we had friends there, and it was one of the places that did liver transplants. And so she could stay with our friends, because you have to be within a certain amount of hours when you get the call. And so when she got accepted on the list, St. Louis was where we had family friends. Her best friend actually lived right there. Bill Kohler was coaching the Rams at the time. He was the defensive coordinator for St. Louis. And anyway, and so she was there and ended up getting the call and got the transplant, but things didn't go well in the surgery. And she, like I said, she ended up spending about a year there fighting infection. And
were you able to go travel back and forth and see her during this time?
Yeah, lots. Yeah, I mean, either my dad or my sister, brother, or myself was always with her there, or a combination of two of us. But we would never let her spend a day there by herself. So for a year, we just swapped, every few weeks going back to St. Louis.
That's terrible, man.
It was rough. Yeah, it was hard to see.
So you think that spurred a moment in your dad where he may have regretted how he spent his time, or maybe it just what happened?
Well, I think a little bit. I think that there was still those trips that they always thought that they would do, or things that they always said they were going to do that they didn't do, that even though they did tons of stuff and had a beautiful life together, it's just those few things they didn't do that kind of ate at him. And so, yeah, I think he just looked at his life and a little bit differently, and looked at where his kids were in life, and I guess maybe just, wanted to share the wisdom that he had sort of gathered through his lifetime from, hey, I always thought it was important to show up to work 9 to 5 every day. And, my dad was always like, he has all these little sayings like, I don't care what you do, pound a nail and pull it out, just do something. He can't stand to see somebody sit idle. And so it was kind of hard for him in the beginning. He couldn't wrap his brain around the fact that what I was doing was work. He supported it, but he couldn't figure out how it would ever translate to a career. His brain wasn't and isn't creative. And, it's very much more like, this wire has to go from that box to that box, and this is how it works. You don't go outside the bounds there. And so, but yeah, that's really where it took the turn for me. Was I had my dad's support, my family's support. At the time I was married, I had my wife's support. We had just had who's my oldest boy, Dawson. And it was like, it's now or never. Give it a try. And yeah,
it's so silly to me that we need like these traumatic moments to shake us into reality. I don't know if I posted about it the other day, but last week, Jason, I went into the dermatologist, and because I had this I don't know, I guess a growth on my shoulder that I was concerned about. And she took a look at it and she goes, ooh, she gave me the face you never want to see a dermatologist give you, or a doctor. Right. And I'm like, what do you mean? Ooh, like what, and she's like, we better do a biopsy on that one. That one does not look good. And I'm like, well, okay, what does that mean? Like, I'm like, so anyways, she cuts it up and throws it in her little drawer or whatever and sends it off the lab. And I said, okay, I'm just kind of a straight shooting dude. I want you to give me the best case scenario and the worst case scenario of what you think it is. And she goes, okay, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, hit me with it, And she goes, okay, so don't freak out. But worst case scenario, it's an aggressive form of melanoma, which if we don't catch it early enough, pretty quickly spreads to your organs. And so if it's that, I'm going to need to send you to OHSU, which is our famous hospital up in Portland. And they're going to have to do full body scans and see if it's already gone into the rest of your body, because that's just the way this works. And I go, well, fuck, give me the good news. Like that's the worst. And she goes, well, the best case scenario, it's just a benign cyst or something, or like a fatty tumor thingy. And I'm like, okay. And then I kind of relaxed, but then on the drive home, you can't help your mind from, I can't. Some people can silo stuff like that and not worry about it. I can't do that. I shouldn't have asked worst case scenario. And she, right before I left, she goes, by the way, don't Google it.
Hey,
and I go, oh yeah, I won't for sure.
WebMD.
And, man, I got home and I started I did it. I went down a rabbit hole. And I started thinking about I'm 42, my kids are young, and I'm like, God damn it. If this is the worst case scenario and you got a 15, 20% survival rate on it, I'm like, if I were to die of this or whatever right now, my kids wouldn't have a dad, and they're 8, 10, and 11. I just can't imagine being a kid that young and not having a dad.
Right.
So then I started going down the rabbit hole of, God, what am I not I feel terrible. I want to play with my kids nonstop. Screw everything else I'm doing. I want to go shoot bows with my sons. I want to, skateboard with my daughter. Let's just go have fun and do all the things. I should not be wasting my time on all these other things. What in the hell? Anyways, it was a whole between when she cut that thing open and my results was 4 days. And in that 4 days, it was the only way that I can describe it. It was a psychedelic experience. It was taking a drug that makes you look around above your body and analyze all the things you're doing. And if you had a month left to live, would you be doing those things? And I know that that's a really dark way to look at it. Most people will be yeah, but most likely they weren't going to be positive. But well, my wife's grandfather died of melanoma. I know 2 or 3 people that have died from melanoma. So it's not it always comes back benign. It was possible. So anyways, it was a very powerful experience, and it made me really, really it really affected me, dude, a lot. Anyways, that was on Tuesday. On Friday, she called me and said it was benign. And I've just been reflecting on it ever since. And I never want to forget that. I never want to forget that feeling, because I think and if people can go through that and not die and actually get a positive outcome, it's highly recommended, because we really do. And I think maybe your dad maybe experienced the same thing. It's so easy and so natural for us in this day and age to get so caught up in so much meaningless bullshit and crap that literally does not matter or provide value to those that matter the most to us, right? And all of us do it, and it takes a lot of discipline to be no, I'm not going to go answer that guy's phone call. I'm going to go out and shoot hoops with my daughter. That guy's phone call can wait. I don't need to worry about that, because my daughter needs me right now. I struggle with that stuff. I'm kind of a workaholic too. So I kind of can relate to maybe, although it was obviously, losing your mother and your dad losing his wife, that's awful. But that enlightening moment probably changed the course of his life and your life in a positive way that maybe your mom would be proud of like, hey, Jason's like living it out what he wanted to do. And someday when you lay down to, go to the other side, you'll be like, God damn it, I had a lot of fun. That was cool. I'm glad I did that. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think, as you get older, you start to be able to prioritize what it is you want too. I mean, do you want the perfect house, the big house, all the fancy things, everything in line, the yard mowed and the driveway clean and everything just pristine? Or, is that what you want? Or do you want to have a comfortable home and a place that you can go and, lay your head down at night and be comfortable, but live your life full of adventure? And I think there's two different things. There are two different types of people. And Bozeman is a very big mix of that. You see it right here. The mix of super successful people that fly in on their private jets to their, mountain lodge that's their third home, and it's just immaculate, and they have everything they ever wanted, from a, physical standpoint.
Material.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. But then Bozeman is also full of people that like live out of their van and just want to ski when the snow is good and just want to, fish when the fishing's good. So I think just based on where I live, you definitely see that there's these two types of people. And for me, I think that was the transition in thinking I needed to check all those boxes of, having a perfect house and having, the 9-to-5 job and having the, white picket fence, so to speak, and living in the neighborhood and all the things that you think you need to do. I think that was the pivotal point of me releasing of thinking I needed those and just living for what felt good to me. And, that probably had a lot to do with just that moment in time and what my family was going through. But
yeah, if you have the opportunity, like I think part of the problem is, and a lot of people don't get the opportunity to spend a lot of time around really wealthy people. And because I think when you do it, you'll find that you might encounter a couple that are like just smiling ear to ear and like super happy. And when I say wealthy, I mean maybe like more materially wealthy people. Yeah. They got a third home, they got a jet, they got this. And I think by nature of what you and I do for a career, we've been exposed to that maybe more than the average person. And because I think what you'll find and what I've seen is, especially when that wealth is transferred from generation to generation, is it can create a lot of good, but oftentimes it creates a lot of not so great. Family trouble, fighting over property, fighting over money, materialism, entitlement. Now, I'm not saying I struggle with this, dude. Like I struggle with what I want to leave behind for my kids and how much I want to like enable them and how much they need to work for. Like, I think that's just a question that could be its own podcast. But my point is like, it's called The New Rich, I think, in the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which is, do you value things or time more? Like, let's just say you had to choose one of those two things. Like, you could have a lot of things or a lot of time to do what you want. There's a world where you can have both. You can have things and time, but you got to be really careful because things are very addicting, right? I love a new truck, the smell of it, like the high you get when you pull it off the lot, the high that you get feeling like worthy that you can pay $40,000 for a truck or whatever. That's addicting, and it's That's why maybe when you make $10 million, you buy 10 cars, and then you need 11 and 12 and 13 or whatever. But man, if you really think about it, or at least in my opinion, I would rather have time. But I struggle with the same shit, man. Like, we could get rid of half of our stuff and I probably wouldn't even know we got rid of. Right?
Well, that's the thing, is the more stuff you have, the more time it takes to take care of it and make sure that, you know, you're giving it the time it deserves, whether it's, you know, a nice house or a big lawn or a new, you know, motorcycle or a new camper or whatever. It's like, the more you have, the more it takes. And so, yeah, finding that balance of having the stuff you want, but still having the time to go live your life. And I'm with you. I mean, for me, I'm a very simple person. I mean, I don't require a lot to be happy. The things that I have acquired and the things that I do have are for my boys to grow up and have those opportunities. They're not for me personally. You know, I feel like I could live with half of what I have if I didn't have the boys, and trying to provide, you know, a basketball hoop and a trampoline and a climbing wall and a mountain bike and a street bike and a skateboard and golf clubs and, you know, all these things, because you just want to, I just want to give them opportunity to find that one thing that makes them light up, like hunting and filming and, you know, producing does for me. You know, hopefully they'll find an interest in it, but, you know, hard to say.
Yeah.
But I feel like we kind of went down a path. When you asked me why I started the show or why I would have left being an electrician, you know, it's not 100% that. It was, dude, I watched every single hunting DVD and every single Marty Stauffer Wild America and Gordon Eastman and the pioneers. I mean, you know, my dad and I would wake up on Saturday morning and watch the hunting shows on TV, and just watching it come to this place to where, you know, you used to have to go rent DVDs at like Blockbuster in the special interest section or Hastings or somewhere like that. And then it came to television, and the bigger it got, the less I felt it represented me. You know, when I watched it, I enjoyed watching it, but it didn't really, I didn't feel like, for the most part, those shows didn't represent what hunting was to people that didn't understand it. And so, you know, I had always filmed from the time I was even way too young to hunt. I would film my dad and George with a little 8mm camera with 2-minute reels of video with no sound or anything. And just kind of fell in love with it. And so I had this opportunity to kind of chase a dream, so to speak. And because of my partnership with John Edwards and Schnees, and being able to kind of take me under their wing and give me the opportunity to create a show, I mean, it was everything I had ever hoped for. And I was going to go at it 100%. And if it worked, fantastic. And if it didn't, I would still never look back. And I never have. You know, that was in 2008. And I do still keep my electrical license. But, you know, we just finished up season 13 of the TV show. And it's hard to believe it's been 13 years.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know how this all works, because I have a lot of non-hunting listeners that are just interested, can you kind of explain the flow of a year? Like, what the hell do you do? If someone walks up to you at a bar and says, I don't hunt, you film hunts? What the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. No, but I mean, really, my year consists of going out there, hunting, doing the best I can to create a story. And for me, my platform has never been I'm going to show you where to go, or I'm going to show you what to use or how to use it, or it's never been a how-to platform. And it's never been based on the size of the animal or the number of kills. My show has always tried to show sort of the heritage behind the hunting, the family traditions, the relationships between hunters and ranchers, and how that all works together for conservation. Try to show the conservation that's being done through elk, through wild sheep, mule deer, wild turkey, whatever it may be, and always keep the focus about the animal and the landscapes they live in. That's kind of the formula. 50% for people that are diehard, been there, done that, and 50% for people who may be watching a hunting show for the very first time and what their takeaway from that would be. And I kind of inject that formula into everything. So that being said, there's a lot of people out there, partners who believe in that message and want to support the conservation stories and want to support, telling the bigger picture of hunters. And so I'll go out and find these partners basically, in different categories, and I work with clothing company, Sitka Gear for clothing. I work with Prime Archery for bows and Schnee's Boots for boots, and, on down the line. And they're really who fund me to be able to go out there and gather this content to be able to tell our story. And so whether I'm out there hunting, filming, gathering content for a project, or sitting in meetings trying to tell my story to a table full of marketing people, it's kind of a mix of both. And
Outdoor Class is the new source of premium outdoor education from trusted and knowledgeable experts. For hunters committed to improving their skills, Outdoor Class is the only subscription-based e-learning platform that provides unlimited access to video lessons from the world's most respected experts. Learn from industry leaders like Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and other experts across all the topics that affect you as a hunter. Make sure to follow Outdoor Class Official on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and take your game to the next level by going to outdoorclass.com. You can use code ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off. That is ALTITUDE at checkout for 20% off at outdoorclass.com.
And
so why can't, for those out there listening that film their own hunts already, because this is a question you get a lot, I get this a lot. Like, how does one turn it into a career? How long does that take? Is it something that you can make a lot of money at? Like, what's your advice to people that like are passionate about the outdoors and or hunting, and they got a camera, they have iMovie on their Mac, they can edit. Can they make a living doing this?
Oh, 100%. I tell everybody that. It's like, it's a big industry. I hate to call it an industry, but it's a big community doing a lot of different things. And there's so many different places to fit in if you're a creative person, from doing, digital marketing designs on the computer for print ads or packaging, or whether you're out there, getting authentic photos in the field for the company to be able to use those for social media posts or print ads or that kind of thing. Or, there's all these different sections, and that's what I mean. It's evolved so much from when I started. There was not all these positions available for somebody creative with a camera. There was very few places you could land, but now, content is king, and there's so many different platforms, and, this fear of oversaturating the market with one thing or the other, that companies are always looking for fresh photos, always looking for fresh video. And if you're authentic and you do it from the heart for reasons that are, pure and meaningful, I think there will always be a place for new people in this industry, whether you're a photographer or a writer, cinematographer, or whatever it may be. And we always need people with fresh ideas and fresh perspectives to come in and, maybe open our eyes to something that we'd overlooked. It's part of that evolution process.
Yeah, I just think it's wise, and this is the same in music or anything else where there's saturation. There's a lot of people doing it. The money from these companies isn't easy to get. You have to prove your worth and earn it. So I think coming in with reasonable expectations and on, what you're going to get back and then how long it takes to actually scratch out like actually a full-time living. I always think it's funny talking to Randy Newberg. He's pretty open and honest about how long it took him to actually turn a dollar on what he does. But look, YouTube's free. Most of us have smartphones. Anybody who hunts already goes on hunts. Like, the barriers to the actual entry point aren't that high. The barriers to actually scratching out a living and making enough money to actually pay the bills, I would say actually are pretty high, because there's a lot of competition and you have to have a certain level of quality in your storytelling to be able to pull off getting companies to support you, for example. But I think if you go at it, and this, I'm speaking from, for those that don't know, I was a marketing director and pretty much still am, I guess, for the last 15 years. So usually I'm the type of person that you have to get through to get money, right? And I have to do the same thing for my own podcast. I have a lunch right after this podcast with a marketing director. So I'm actually on, I live on both sides of the table. Yeah. But the thing that really attracts companies, if you're looking to do what Jason does, is exactly what Jason said. It's being authentic to you, telling your story, not copycatting, like really, really being original and doing things that are remarkable. That doesn't mean you have to like do things that are dangerous where you're going to die necessarily, but like telling stories that are remarkable, or just telling pretty average hunting stories over the course of a long period of time and just develop your own local following, sort of like what Born and Raised did, or the hunting public. There's so many examples of people that just do what they do, like hunting public. Like, we're just going to hunt whitetails and on public land and film it, and over the course of a long period of time they have a humongous following. But don't expect right out of the gate for companies to be stroking checks to you just because you hunt and you have a camera. That is one of the biggest flaws I see when you go to these shows. Sometimes people walking around be like, well, I hunt, I have a camera, I shoot big. That's the other thing. Don't think just because you shoot big things that companies are going to stroke checks to you, because I have some news for you. A lot of people shoot big stuff, and that's cool. Congratulations. But that alone will not do it. So it's just, it's repetition, it's dedication, it's authenticity, and it's like being, not being, what would you call this, Jason? Like, douchey, like sort of,
just be humble, don't come into it thinking that you're the next best thing in the hunting industry, because like you say, I mean, there's a lot of guys that think they're the next best thing in the hunting industry, and chances are you are talented and you bring something to the table that nobody else has ever seen, but it's going to go a whole lot further if you have a friendly, humble approach to it than trying to shove it down people's throats and telling them.
Sponsorship hack number 1. Don't show up to the first meeting with your photo album of all the big stuff you've killed. Don't lead with that. That's like the number 1 turnoff.
That's the way it was when I came into it.
Oh, yeah, dude. I remember people walking around with their photo albums.
dude, people packing around their bucks.
Oh yeah.
Like literally packing around heads.
Oh my God. I would run the other way when I was at Sitka if I saw that. The physical photo albums were the worst because they would pull them out of their bed. They'd be like, do you have a minute? And I know if someone says that, I automatically don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, yes. And then like a saber out of their backpack comes this huge photo album. And it's like, let's start 10 years ago.
Oh,
Here's
man.
the bull I shot. It scored 321 and an eighth. And then this and that. I'm like, oh my God, dude, I'm glazed over. I'm done. This is not happening. But if you come in and been like, and actually the best way to do it is just go integrate into the industry, give your product away for free, give your time away for free, go make friends, be authentic, like go on adventures with cool people that are already more successful than you, and keep putting out your product, keep working hard. People notice it, and all of a sudden you might get your first sponsorship, and then the second one, and then the third one. The worst way to go about it is the things we just described, right, Jace?
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, you look at the people who have been able to break through, and they're all very down to earth, very approachable, very humble people. The people that are not that way get weeded out pretty quickly and are a bit alienated in a room, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that's, I don't know, it's a funny industry because one thing that I've gotten really just tired of over 13 years is people thinking that because I have a TV show or because I have a following, that I'm trying to prove that I'm a better hunter than them, or like, you know, trying to prove that I know more than them. And I can't tell you how many times I've said, I'm not a better hunter. I probably don't know more than you about what you're talking about. What I have is time, just time in the field. And that's what makes me successful year after year. And when you spend that much time in the field year after year, you're going to learn a thing or two. I mean, this year I killed my bull on the 4th day of the season. Last year I spent 28 days out there and never even came to full draw on a bull. And
yeah,
so,
hunters. Well, I think this is just a male problem. We are naturally wired to be territorial and threatened. And especially if you're like an alpha male, right? There's this thing where if you see somebody on a screen doing something that you feel like you're good at, you automatically take that as a threat, as this person is trying to tell me they're better than me just because they're on TV. Like I hear people say all the time, like for an example, Jason, like Steve Vernella, I can't believe he has a show on Netflix. He's not even that good of a hunter. It's like, I don't think Steve, I don't know him personally, but I don't think Steve would tell you he's the best hunter. Like Steve gets to spend a lot of time out there. He's probably definitely one of the most well-articulated hunters I've met and seen. But as far as like skill level, I think he's a really good hunter, but I don't think he tricks himself into thinking he's the best hunter on earth. What he is really good at is telling stories and speaking and, representing the sport, for example. There are people that I know that I will not mention names that will tell you they think they are the best hunter on earth. And that does exist, but most of the time the people on TV or in these YouTube channels, they don't think they're the best hunters. And if they do, deep down they know they're not. Because I have more news for you folks. How would you even determine if you're the best hunter? Like, what are your metrics? How do you measure that? I've tried to think about how that would even be done, if it could be done. Like for example, in golf or the NBA or baseball, like there's real science behind that, but the variables in hunting are so wide ranging. For example, like if you have enough money, you can pay to shoot just about whatever you want. You can shoot the biggest stuff. So big doesn't necessarily mean you're the best hunter. Then you could say, well, if it's public or private, okay. Well, what about if I draw the best tag in Wyoming and I shoot a big bull on public? Does that mean I'm the best hunter? No, it just means I drew a great tag and I shot a nice bull, right? Mm-hmm. So then you might say, well, it's if you got every species. Well, no, I can pay to do that. If I have the time and the money, I could just about anybody could do that with, so then you're like, well, it's the weapon. If you're traditional, that means you're the greatest hunter. Well, not so much. I don't think that's right either. So like you can go around and around in circles, but the reality is there's no way to measure that. So, and the even bigger point is who fucking cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
If like this is not and should not be a competition. You can have fun with buddies, right? Like, oh, I shot a bigger bull than you, you loser, stuff like that. Who cares?
Good meat bowl.
Yeah. Jason and I do that all the time. Like he texted me his 400-inch bull this year, and that's my first response. Nice meat bowl. But he knows that I'm kidding, and it's just like, that's just what your buddies do. But if you truly think that you're the best hunter, I got news for you. Most likely you are not. Absolutely. You might be the best, the perceived best within your narrow niche in hunting, for example. Like,
sure.
I'll give you an example of that. Like, I think Dustin Rowe is probably one of the best sheep guides there is. But I would not, I don't know if there's a way to measure if he is the best, nor do I even care. He's definitely one of the best. But, and you could do that with elk and so on. But the point is, it's so pointless. It does not matter. So right. that's not the greatest angle to come at it. And if you feel threatened, you should check yourself. Be like, if you find yourself watching Jason's show and you say, why is he's trying to act like he's a better hunter than me? It's like, well, that actually might be you getting defensive because you're insecure. Because in reality, Jason doesn't even know who you are. He doesn't care if he's a better hunter than you. He's just telling his own stories.
Right.
It's also obnoxious.
Yeah, for sure. I never really thought that my hardest conversations would come, trying to tell our story, would come with other hunters. When I first got into this, I really envisioned like, okay, you better be ready. The antis, man, they're going to hammer on you. Just be ready because it's going to happen, and I'm like psyching myself up when the first shows start hitting the air, and then a year goes through, and then all this, and 13, 14 years later, man, I've had by far my hardest conversations with other hunters, and just straight up hate, for like you say, I've never met people. I wish them the best. I have nothing, when we go into these rooms full of other hunters, I hope everybody in that room has the best season they've ever had. I really do. And I'll worry about myself. This last year I had a exceptional season, which doesn't always happen. I didn't do anything different. I didn't use any other tactic or scent or, in any sort of product that just elevated me way up here. I did everything I had been doing for years, and things just fell together. So because of that, and knowing how it works, I'm bracing for 2 or 3 years of really bad hunting. I mean, I'm just like, that's how it works. Take the good with the bad, you know, and I guess it does. If there's one thing that I just kind of put my head down to over and over is just the comments that I see, not only on my page, but just from hunter to hunter. And when you look at what's going on, from this outside looking in, and you look at the major threats to hunting and the major things that are going to affect our future of whether we're going to be able to do this or not, or our kids are going to be able to do it. It's not whether or not we hunt with a bow or a rifle, or whether we hunt on public or private. And so you find yourself realizing what a waste of time that is, when we could be working together on solving things that are much more important, like, what's happening to the mule deer herds in a lot of places? Is it, lack of quality habitat? Is it too many tags being given? Is it we've become too effective? Is it we shouldn't hunt the rut? There's so many things we could be looking at that would help all of us and help the landscape and help the wildlife, that it gets hard to want to listen to the noise of so many things that happen online that in the end will not change one more month of being able to hunt in the end, or one more season, or any of it. And so I wish more people would take that passionate energy they have and direct it towards real change, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember when I didn't start shooting a compound until I was 38 or 37, one of those two. And I grew up in a very passionate traditional bow community, and I'm still passionate about it. I shoot my recurve almost every day with my son, but I also hunt with a compound and a rifle, and I like all the things. But I'll never forget some of the feedback I got when I did that. I even got a long letter from a very good friend of mine, explaining how I was, ruining bow hunting. Not I was, but like I was part of this movement that's ruining bow hunting. And, the only true bow hunting is traditional bow hunting, even though everybody defines that as differently. One guy might say traditional bow hunting is, a self bow that you created yourself with wood arrows and, glue on broadheads. Another guy might say it's okay. No, it's okay to shoot carbon and, a fiberglass recurve with a clicker on it and all these things. But the other guy might say the next thing and so on. It's all stupid. It's not, I shouldn't say it's stupid. It's sure, have the debates, fine. But the point is I am no less of a hunter because I like enjoying multiple weapons, and as long as it's legal and ethical, and I'm assuming that if it's legal and ethical, those debates have been had and it's legal, so I can do it. And you can do whatever you want to do. I shot a blacktail deer this year with a recurve. It was fun. It was awesome. I miss hunting with a recurve. But my point is, Jason, it's so irritating, the territory wars that even just take this, for example. I was recalling it when Jason and I were in Reno, Nevada last week together at the Wild Sheep Foundation show that everybody goes to every year. And I remember when there was no clothing companies in that room. I remember when Sitka bought a booth. We were the first technical clothing company there. There was probably some other clothing there, traditional stuff. Now you walk around that room and there's, a half a dozen things to choose from KUIU to whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in my time at Sitka, especially the last 7 or 8 years, I would define what occurred as the camo wars, right? It was almost like East versus West, Biggie and Tupac, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I'm a KUIU guy, and you're a greaser, and I'm whatever the names were of those gangs. It was like almost like gang mentality, or tribal mentality. But out of all the things I thought hunters would fight about, I never thought that they would fight about camouflage and clothing, right? Weapons, there's good debates to have there. And there actually is worthy debates there, right? Are we going too far? What is the line? Those are worthy debates to have. I'm not saying they're not. But fighting over what camo pattern you wear or what clothing you choose to wear, like, think how fucking stupid that is. Like, really think about that. And we spend, unfortunately, I spent years involved in that and complicitly, right? I used to get fired up if I saw somebody wearing KUIU. Fired up. It'd make me angry, right? And now that I've been out of it for a while, I'm like, how much of a waste of fucking time that was. Yeah. It does not matter. Wear whatever brand makes you happy, whatever makes you more successful. And if your buddy wears the opposite one, it doesn't mean he's any different than you. It just means he's wearing some different clothing. Isn't that so stupid?
Yeah, it's kind of wild what it's become, that's for sure. And to your point, yeah, I never would have imagined. I always, to your point, I always think of the scene in Anchorman when all of them show up in the alley. All the different news teams are showing up. I'm like, that's what it feels like.
That's so true, dude. That's almost how stupid it is.
Yeah, it's silly. And
like, think if our ancestors could see that. Like, they were like struggling to survive and find food and water and stay and shelter, and we're like fighting over what $500 jacket we wear.
Yeah. That's
right?
when you know, life is really good.
Yeah, that's a good indicator that you have it pretty goddamn good.
Yeah.
If you can fight over stuff like that. Man, I don't know. We all get caught up in it.
There's obviously a lot of good things that come with competition too.
Yep.
I mean, if you never had that person that keeps you on edge, that you're trying to sort of one up all the time, you can get complacent. And yeah, I mean, products probably wouldn't be where they were today if there weren't all these other companies that come on board and push each other.
The way I always looked at it was, we should treat each other like football teams. If you want to be tribal, fine. Let's go out and shred each other on the field, meaning like in business competition, like healthy competition. But as soon as the gear comes off, we should be able to have a beer and laugh at how stupid it is. And
totally.
You know what I mean? And, it's not stupid because it's people's livings. It's companies that, can't fail and all these things. But if the healthiest mindset I ever had was, it's a game, or like, if you watch UFC, like I watch a lot of UFC, these guys are like in the rink, they want to knock each other out, which is pretty much as close as you can come to legally killing somebody, right? And then at least most of the time they can hug when they're like bleeding out of their face. They can't even open their eyes and like, dude, that was so awesome, man. Oh yeah, hell yeah, good job. Thank you for beating the shit out of me. Like that's the best example of, you should be able to do that. Yeah. Right. But a lot of times in this industry, it's not that way. Like there's lots of real friendships that are completely ruined because of these tribal things that occur.
Yeah, not to go down a rabbit hole, but just in society in general, people have become so one side or the other. Not everybody, but it seems like that common ground has been lost. And I feel like a lot of people, whether it's in the hunting industry or just in society in general, want to come back to that common ground.
Yeah, you can listen for indicators if somebody's a Republican or a Democrat, right? And if you're extreme to one side, someone says, I don't know, whatever, diversity, for example, it like triggers you, and like I am now I am now against this person. If you're like, see what I'm saying? Like there's these triggers, and it's like so polarizing. Yeah, and it's hard not to fall into it, right? And yeah, you're right. That's at the highest level, it occurs in all of our aspects of life, but it just seems like it's getting worse. It's getting worse. Did you see yesterday M&M's? You see this M&M's controversy that was going on?
Mm-mm.
So M&M's came out with these new M&M's that were like, and forgive me if I'm wrong about this, folks, because I didn't spend a lot of time worrying about it, but they came out with like maybe gender neutral M&Ms or something. I can't remember. It was something like that. And anyways, there was such a huge backlash from the right that they ended up stopping it, which I tend to be more on the right than the left. I can understand the concerns, right? But I was like, this is how stupid we are. Like there was hundreds of thousands of people that were like lying awake worrying about like what M&Ms look like. And again, I understand why, I guess, but that's where we are as a society.
No,
like fucking M&Ms, right? I just like the way they taste. I don't need M&Ms. I don't need M&Ms to push agendas down my throat, and I also am not going to lie awake at night and worry about what they do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I do think it's as bad as it's ever been. But I think it had to get to that point for us to recognize how much we appreciate common ground again. And so, the majority of the people I talk to are like you and I. I mean, we may lean one side or the other, but we really just want to have those conversations in the middle, So
well, the middle is oftentimes the right answer.
Exactly. And to bring it back to the industry, I mean, it's the competitiveness of it. There's pros and cons. I think even like, you see a lot of good conservation movements come out of people wanting to create change or not believing in one way or the other. And so new organizations form and they fill these voids that, you know, maybe these big higher up organizations weren't filling on these high levels of what they're doing, but it doesn't discredit for the need of this work down here. And so you see these new organizations or ideas coming about, and it all is just working together. And so I think from what I've seen when I started to now, I think the hunting industry as a whole has has their head in the right space a lot more, you know, from the top down. It seems like a lot of my partners align with me because they love the conservation messages. They love the work that's being done and they want to support that on whatever, you know, kind of platform or level they can. And I didn't see that getting into it. You know, Project Elk for me, that was in 2014, and that was the first real kind of conservation film I've done. And since then, it's really put me on this path to do more of it for different areas and different animals in different areas of the country. And but you see, you know, that the whole conservation term has become a bit more trendy than it was 10 years ago, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's cool that, you know, people coming in or older hunters coming in, even in the people like you and I that have been doing it our whole lives, having that be the center of everything we do around it, I think is important. And I didn't see that 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think by and large and in general, you know, there's a lot of chatter, negative things online when people don't have to be accountable. But when it comes down to it, I do think the community is pretty aligned, generally speaking. In the middle, there's outliers. When people actually have to when you actually hold people's feet to the fire and actually bring them together, pretty rarely is there any nasty in-person conversations or debates or shit talking or tribalism. It's mostly behind the back or online, which is true across all walks of life, not just this industry. Our industry is under a lot of fire more than ever, not only from normal things like anti-hunting, population issues, disease issues, but also now from the inside out, meaning there's so many hunters now. Opportunity is becoming an issue that more people are talking about. You know, we've done a great job of recruiting so many people, and I believe that's a good thing. But now we're like, man, it's harder to get tags. You know, look at Idaho, look at Arizona, look at all these states that used to be so easy to get tags in. And now it's like a freaking hotline you got to call into once a year, and you better get there on time or you're out, man. And even if you get there on time, you might be out. And that's kind of the road we're heading down. I think there's only a couple truly over-the-counter states left, like truly over-the-counter, meaning you can just walk in and buy a tag for elk. And that's Colorado and Oregon. And I even think over the next couple of years, those will be the same system that Idaho and Arizona and everybody else has gone to, where it's like a little bit more controlled than that, just because the demand is overwhelming the supply. And that's an issue that is contentious, but it also can bring us together to be like, okay, you know, what do we do from here? And also the one that really brings the people together is when like herds are dying from out here. It's that rotting hoof rot in elk, which is nasty. I got a cow on a trail camera with that 2 years ago. It's so sad to watch, man. She could barely walk. And it's spreading out here. They have theories as to why, but no one really knows why, but it's detrimental. And then we have humongous mule deer issues going on all over the West. Oregon's been struggling for quite a while, but even now in Montana, right? Wyoming, Idaho, Arizona, our mule deer populations are not doing well.
Right.
Collectively speaking, there might be areas that are, but collectively speaking, they are not doing well. So I'm hoping that these issues that affect everybody will bring more people together and create like healthy debates and not drive more people apart. Because I think if we further sub-segment this industry, we're headed for trouble.
Yeah. Well, I think when I look at what I do and the people that I'm surrounded by and what our goals and missions are through what we're doing, I think we need to do a better job of telling our story from the very beginning on and why it's important. I think a lot of people have come into the middle of hunting and don't understand the big picture. This selective film I'm working on, a big part of that is talking about why the oldest male in a healthy population and healthy ecosystem is the best to take, like an old dry female is. But we also want to bring attention to the fact that, in areas where you have 300 elk and 10 bulls, and the oldest bull is 3.5, you're not doing that herd justice by killing that 3.5-year-old bull and saying, like, we did it, we got the old bull. In that case, selective hunting is killing 120 cows and not touching your bulls, and so I don't think a lot of people understand that start to finish, what the difference is. I think a lot of too many people get a deer tag in Montana and they go out and they say, I don't care about the horns. I'm just out there for meat. Well, if that's truly what you're doing, then you shouldn't be going to kill a 2-point mule deer for meat. A, you can find better tasting meat, and B, that's not doing that animal herd any justice. So I think, from young kids to people coming into it, understanding if meat is truly what you want, go contact a rancher that is overrun with cow elk. They will not only show you where they're at, they will help you get them out. They will do everything, and you'll have a full freezer. Leave the mule deer bucks alone. If deer is what you want, maybe you don't like elk, well, then go to the river bottom into one of those fields that has 200 white-tailed does and 30 little scrub bucks and kill does. And I don't think anybody really does it intentionally. I just think that we need to sort of re-educate. I was just on Ben O'Brien's podcast, and I teach, the one thing I hear over and over is, trophy hunting or selective hunting is this thing that you become after, this evolution of a hunter. And I think it should be okay to start as a selective hunter. I teach my boys that, I don't let them go out and just take anything because they're a young hunter and they've never shot anything before. I make them understand the consequences of sure, bud, you could take that antelope buck. I know it's your first tag, but let's just break him down for a minute. He's young. You can tell by looking at his nose. You can tell by looking at his body. He's just coming into it. There's not a lot of young bucks in this area. Why don't we keep hunting for something older? And then I'll just say, but if you like the looks of him, it's your tag, and they'll look at him and, no, I think I'd like to keep hunting. And so I don't think that selective hunting or trophy hunting, especially now, should just be this thing you evolve into. I think people coming in need to understand why that is so important, from taking the oldest, most mature mule deer out of a healthy area with lots of age structure, lots of available habitat. The difference in that versus, going out and shooting a 3.5-year-old raghorn bull out of a herd because he was the oldest one you could find, and the differences in that throughout that. And so selective, a big part of what I'm trying to do with this documentary is not form this argument against anti-hunting or try to, shove anything in their face. It's more trying to better define what selective hunting is on a mass scale.
With all this work you've done on this, because I think it's easy to, when you say selective hunting, I immediately in my brain go to trophy hunting, right? But I thought it was interesting, the delineation you just gave. It doesn't always mean that. It means, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm just trying to formulate a definition based off what you just said. More of what it means is taking the correct animal that has out of the herd that has the least impact on the overall health of the herd.
Yeah, in individual areas.
Yeah. Based on where you are. In some places that might be there's 30 cows, 3 bulls, and there's a 9-year-old bull and a spike and a 3-year-old bull. You obviously want to shoot the 9-year-old bull, right? And leave that 3-year-old, because he's going to be coming into his prime, probably 5 years old ish.
Yeah,
5, 6.
5, 6 is when they'll start
But in other areas, like in where I live, Jason, in Roosevelt country, good luck finding a bull over 5. Like, they just, and I know they exist. I killed one last year. They do exist, but they're very rare. And it's because of several factors. One being, most of our elk in this coast range, they winter in farmer fields, and farmers, their whole family gets tags for the rifle seasons. And at daylight on opening day, if there's 50 elk in a herd, which would be a pretty big herd for Roosevelt's, there's going to be 5 or 7 bulls, couple spikes, couple raghorns, maybe a decent, and in some places they all get shot. So next year you got whatever calves were bulls that year, then they're going to be spikes, and maybe a spike escaped the slaughter, so they're going to be a little raghorn. Anyways, this happens over the course of time, and these smaller herds, because Roosevelt's just aren't as dense as in a lot of areas as like, say, in Montana, where there's 300 elk in a herd. It just takes a lot more time to rebound. So I guess what my question is like, for us living in normal areas where there's just not a lot of old elk, like most of us live in over-the-counter areas where there's lots of opportunity. These elk it's a miracle from God if they live to 5 or 6 or 10. What bull should we be taking? Because a lot of times it is just a 5-point in the herd, a 3.5-year-old 5-point. Should we choose to just not come home with an elk? I'm just asking, theoretically speaking.
Yeah, I think it's obviously going to be different in every area, because there are areas where that's perfectly fine. If you have available habitat, available feed, cover, water, and you have that herd structure that does have 20 bulls to 100 cows, and you are seeing, 5-plus-year-old bulls, and you are seeing spikes, and you are seeing this range in between, I certainly don't think that in those areas it's as impactful to take those, middle of the ground type bulls, because you have all the other healthy factors around it. Mm-hmm. It's just when you really look at animal populations and, buck to doe or bull to cow ratios, and how many of those are actually just right on par, there's not that many. Yeah. But in places where it is, that's the balance we're looking for. And so it is a hard question, because it is something different to everybody. I just think that helping people understand the difference between shooting a 2-point mule deer in eastern Montana for meat, when the herd is suffering right now, versus, a white-tailed doe along the river somewhere for meat, where it's actually helping bring that buck to doe ratio back to a healthier place. And just having people really look at where they're hunting, what do the herds look like, what's the buck to doe ratio, what's the landscape look like, and trying to make the best decision from there. Because just because it's legal doesn't mean we should do it and we should have to fill every tag. Personally, it drives me nuts that Montana issues 4 mule deer doe tags in some areas to an individual. If I had my way, I wouldn't issue 4 mule deer tags statewide, let alone to one individual.
Does, mule deer does.
Does, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
we struggle with the same thing here with blacktail doe tags. They'll give away hundreds of them, and I'm like, dude, there isn't even that number of does in that unit. Like literally, if everybody filled that tag, they would kill every doe plus some that don't even exist to fill all those tags.
Totally.
And I don't know where these numbers are coming from. Like, where do you get? Oh, it's probably out of a spreadsheet somewhere. It's an opportunity thing because they get so much shit. More people want more opportunities, and they got to fulfill. I don't know, but sometimes I'm like, where are you getting 500 doe tags for this unit?
I know.
I can barely go spend an entire day with great optics and see 5 does.
That's why I think, having that selective mentality, understanding the consequences of your actions and why you're shooting, what you're shooting, when you're shooting it, I think is important. I think a lot more people would self-police themselves if they showed up in parts of Montana and were like, oh, I can get 4 mule deer doe tags, and they haven't seen 4 mule deer does in the last 2 weeks of hunting. I would like to think that moving forward, more people would go, no, I mean, I know I could get it, but why? I wouldn't take one if I had the opportunity. These things need to bounce back.
Yeah, there's a weird thing around mule deer does. Like, I have no problem shooting whitetail does. When I lived in Montana, I would shoot 2 or 3 of them a year. But just the thought of having a mule deer doe tag, for me, I'm like, God, I don't want to shoot a damn mule deer doe. Like, I don't know. For some reason, there's just some special thing around mule deer where I don't want to shoot a doe. But maybe it's
just so fragile. I mean, a whitetail, you just don't see fields of deer from West Coast to East Coast full of mule deer like you do whitetails. You can land in any big city, hop in an Uber, your buddy's car, and hit the outskirts of town, and there's whitetails running in the fields anywhere. When you really break it down, man, there's so few spots where there's mule deer like that. I would imagine that's probably what weighs in when we think about just how cringy it is to shoot mule deer does personally,
Yeah. I guess I just never thought of it that way. What, the overall message for the film that you want people to walk away with? First of all, when does this film come out?
Summer of 2023. So around when Total Archery Challenge is going to be here at Big Sky.
Okay.
Yeah.
What message do you want people to walk away with from this film?
The main message I want people to walk away with from this film is to be proud of what we've done as a hunting culture and community. Be proud of the fact that trophy hunting is something that has been a beautiful thing. The records of North American big game have proved what a successful conservation philosophy this has been from the beginning. And to embrace it, be proud of it, understand that because of selective hunting, we've rebounded hunted and non-hunted species, some of them from the brink of extinction. And it is because of selective hunting as a bedrock philosophy. And the fact that we dance around the topic as though it's something negative bothers me. And I think that if more hunters understood where it came from the beginning to the end, it would give them a lot more confidence to have this conversation on a higher level and make people or help people understand the importance of trophy hunting and how even hunters don't agree that that's a proper term. Every single person I've interviewed, experts, I can't find people who are more well-versed on the topic. Nobody really even knows where the term came from. Was it something hunters gave ourselves? Was it something that was coined onto us?
The Altitude Show is brought to you by Peaks Equipment, the world's leading technical, hard goods, and accessories brand for backcountry enthusiasts. From trekking poles to headlamps to best-in-class gaiters, Peaks delivers a system of products that work to achieve optimal performance in the harshest conditions. Don't suffer on your hunting adventures. Peaks enables you to thrive on the mountain when everyone else is going home. Visit peaksequipment.com and use code ALTITUDE for 10% off today. That's ALTITUDE for 10% off on peaksequipment.com.
So the best we can figure is when they first came out with the records program, it wasn't something the public was really aware of. And so they had to come up with a way to incentivize hunters to bring in their animals to get measured so they could start the documentation of these records for conservation purposes. And so best we can find out is that the term trophy came because regional areas would incentivize hunters with something to bring in their animal and get it scored. And it wasn't because any other reason than people needed to become aware of why to bring their animals in to be scored. And so it's just interesting we've been left with this term for all these years, and it's something that's used against us. And when you really peel back the layers to the onion, you realize that it's this beautiful story from start to finish, that started with a taxidermy collection is literally what sparked the public's involvement in wildlife conservation in North America. So fascinating story start to finish. To sum it up, what I want people to get out of it is that trophy or selective hunting is and always has been a beautiful thing as it pertains to conservation, and we should be proud of it and continue it and just be better versed at the conversations moving forward.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. I'm glad you're doing this because, even myself, who's been around this my whole life, I've always not loved that term. It's
none of us do. That's what's funny. It's not like any hunter is over here going, yeah,
trophy.
I'm a trophy hunter.
Yeah.
Nobody's.
That has such weird vibes with it. But also it's indirectly had great impacts. And it's also had negative impacts. Let's not lie. There's been bad things that have come with people wanting to get things that score more than the next guy, which there's always people that will do shitty things no matter what industry you're in, right?
You bet.
And
it has become a bit of a ranking system for some people in their own mind to prove their rank amongst other hunters. And even though it does show that, it more importantly shows how successful this North American model of wildlife conservation has been since they started keeping the records. I was there last year. I watched all these new world records of multiple species of big game from all over North America rolling in. It's not like there's just one animal that's thriving. It's really impressive to see these big animals keep rolling in. Every 7 years there's world records broken. So it's
there was a new Oregon State record last year for elk, which is crazy.
Yeah, there's a new world record mountain goat.
Wasn't there just a new world record elk that got killed in Montana last year too?
Not that I've heard. Not that I've heard. But when you really break it down, it is the only piece of documentation that proves that hunting is conservation. Without the records keeping system of North America, we have nothing to hang our hat on. And that's why, it is so important. And they do know there's flaws in it. And they do know, there's a lot of arguments with the scoring system. But the problem is they have to keep it consistent. For the records way back when to be consistent with the records now, they can't change, even though we've recognized flaws in the scoring and deductions and things. We have to keep that median for these records to be relevant to anyone in the world to look at and go, wow, yeah, look at the size of animals in the 50s compared to now, all down through this book.
I think the factor that people need to remember, especially non-hunters that are listening to this, when they think about these records, I was told I've never got an official score done on any of my animals. Because you can just look up the instructions on how to do it. And I use score as something fun for conversational things like, hey, what did that buck score behind you there, Jason?
It's a good reference.
It's like a reference point. Like, I don't really care like where it ranks or whatever.
Right.
But with my bull this year, I'm like, gosh, that's such an unbelievable animal. I'm going to get it scored. I'm not going to enter it, but I want it scored by someone that actually knows. Because me and my buddies scored it, but we were like in his garage with beers and like a stiff tape measure, like guessing. You know what I mean? So you're like, I don't know if we did that right. Anyways, what they told me when I got that done, which I thought was really cool, like just a different way to look at it. Don't think of it as a ranking system. Think of it as a way an animal can't get big unless they have good habitat, good food, good shelter, good water, and age. And genetics, good genetics, right? Mm-hmm. Like all those things have to come together for an animal to get big in the scoring system. Therefore, if this is like one of the key indicators in tracking the health of our herd is knowing how many of these, I mean, you can call them a successful individual animal in a herd. This bull, he's probably 10 years old, 9 years old, something like that. And obviously has good genetics, good shelter, good food, good water, good minerals, all the above.
All the things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I that was a really helpful way for me to look at it. And then when you officially enter them, which I won't, and I haven't, not because I'm against, I just don't, I don't know why. I don't have a good reason. But when you do, they can be like, they can keep this record over the course of many years of where these herds are healthy and where they're not, and maybe so when they see these different areas where there's never any records coming from or trophy animals coming from, maybe there's good questions that are asked as to why. Maybe the habitat's fucked up. Maybe there's too many tags. Maybe they're shooting too many young ones. I don't know, whatever the factors might be, how else could you measure that?
Right. No, and it points out obvious holes in where our wildlife is struggling. I know talking to the panel scores and a bunch of them down at this last 7-year awards in Missouri, caribou, our caribou herds overall are suffering a little bit. And that's become recognizable at the lack of entries over the last 7 years versus, mountain goats are doing good. Elk are crushing right now. Whitetails are doing good. All these other species, it's obvious. But yeah, and all it is a data point. Your entry is a data point, and it's hundreds of thousands of data points over time to create this big picture of what's going on, good or bad. And when you really break it down, I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't need to become a member of Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young because I don't believe in scoring my animals or entering my animals or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, I do think those organizations need our support because of the records they hold and the importance it has on every other wildlife organization out there, and hunting overall.
Yeah.
So it's been a super fun project. I mean, I love doing the TV show going into season 14, but nothing gives me the satisfaction of doing the documentary films and working with experts and just learning every time I sit down and turn that camera on. It's so fascinating, our story from the very get-go, and it's just fun to try to tell it and have these hard to have conversations in a very non-apologetic, but kind of diplomatic way,
Yeah. Well, I always enjoy your projects, and I consider you one of my best friends in the industry, and I'm super proud of all the cool work that you do. And
thank you.
I'm still always going to give you shit at every corner. But it's all with love.
No, I wouldn't expect anything.
It's my job. It's your job too.
I fully expect every time I post a picture of an elk that I'm going to get, that's a good meat bowl comment fired up.
He's an eater.
Yeah, he'll eat good. That's for sure.
Dude, I have to head off to another meeting here, but I appreciate you coming on, and we're going to do this every several months. So
Cool.
there's so much more we got to dig into, but everybody should go out and support what Jason's doing. Follow him on Instagram, Facebook, subscribe to his YouTube channel, watch his show on the Sportsman Channel, correct?
Correct.
Watch his show on the Sportsman's Channel. Watch his films, Project Elk, Project Mule Deer, bunch of other stuff. Really, really incredible dude, and so genuine and just pleasant to be around. You don't feel like you're in an ego contest. So thank you for coming on. And
well, thank you. I appreciate hearing all that, and just can't say thanks enough for the support and friendship, and always being there to bounce stuff off of, giving me your honest opinion. I need that sometimes when it comes to films or ideas, and so appreciate you, man.
Yeah, and I won't lose this episode.
Well, give us an excuse to talk again, whatever.
Hey, everybody, one last thing. Make sure you go subscribe to the Altitude Show YouTube channel. We put all the full interviews on there, plus a bunch of clips off the interviews. Also, follow me on Instagram, DaveBrinker_. Side note, I have a new song out, and I'll play a little clip of it right here. You guys should all go check that out. I'm pretty proud of it. It's called Wild as Me. And as always, have a great day. Our first episode of, I'm going to start doing Friday episodes, just me. They're going to be called Elevation Gain Fridays. It's just going to be learnings from the week's guests, health things that I am working on, books I'm reading. It'll be really cool. I think you guys are going to like it. So this will be out. You'll be listening to this probably on a Thursday, which is tomorrow. But tomorrow, Friday, if you're listening to this on Thursday, is the first episode of the Friday Elevation Gain. So I hope you guys enjoy it. We will see you next time.